The bells of Amboise pierce through your sleep like needles through silk, their bronze voices calling matins across the Loire Valley, with all the subtlety of a merchant hawking rotten fish. You wake to the sound of your own breathing, shallow and quick, trapped between the scratchy wool of your bedding and the stone wall that has been your companion these past 3 years. The wall knows your secrets better than any confessor every midnight wheeze. Every prayer whispered in languages you're not supposed to understand. Every bitter laugh that escapes when you think no one, not even God, is listening. Your body unfolds from sleep like a marionette with tangled strings. The motley those diamond-patterned hose in their garish yellows and reds. The party-colored doublet that makes you look like a walking chessboard clings to your skin with the persistence of a guilty conscience. Your spine curves against the wall's dampness. Always damp, these chateaux along the Loire, as if the very stones weep for the taxes extracted from peasants to build them. The moisture seeps through everything. Your clothes, your bedding, your bones, your jokes. Even your wit feels damp some mornings, in need of a good fire and several cups of hypocras to restore its edge. Which means even your morning piss must contain the possibility of entertainment, should the wrong person, or rather the right person, at the wrong moment, happen upon you. Without the cap, you are merely a man of perhaps 30 years, lean from irregular meals and the peculiar mustiness that comes from too many people living too close together while pretending to enjoy each other as company. The walls are hung with tapestries depicting mythological scenes, Jupiter seducing Europa Hercules, completing his labors. Other stories of gods and heroes who never worried about where their next meal was coming from, or whether their latest joke might be their last. The tapestries are beautiful woven in Flemish workshops by artisans who understood that beauty and utility need not be enemies, but they also serve a practical purpose. They absorb sound, creating the acoustic privacy necessary for the kind of conversations that keep kingdoms running and enemies dying in their beds rather than on battlefields. And constant anxiety, with hands that shake slightly from too much wine and not enough sleep. With the cap, you become something else entirely. A creature licensed to speak truths that would cost other men their tongues. A walking contradiction whose very existence depends on the curious human need to laugh at things that should inspire only tears. You reach for the cap that marks your profession, its bells silent in the gray light, but ready to sing their silver song at the slightest movement. 3 bells, each tuned to a different note, creating harmonies that sound suspiciously like laughter when you move your head just so. She keeps her eyes down, as servants are taught to do, but you catch the slight smile that tugs at the corner of her mouth. She recognizes the jester, the man who makes the powerful look foolish and somehow survives to do it again the next day. To servants, jesters are fellow travelers in the strange landscape of court life, people who understand that power is performance, and that the best performances often happen when the audience thinks it is not watching. The cap itself is made of felt that has seen better decades, dyed a red that was once vibrant, but now resembles the color of dried blood, which, considering your profession, seems appropriate. And the Loire Valley, beyond these walls, is green with the kind of optimism that comes before harvest failures and plague outbreaks. The Loire moves past the chateau with the steady persistence of time itself, indifferent to the rise and fall of kings, to the burning of heretics, to the laughter that echoes from the grate. All when you manage to thread the needle between clever and treasonous. The river has seen Valois and Plantagenet, has reflected the flames of English raids and the banners of French victories, and it will continue flowing long after your own particular brand of carefully calculated irreverence has been forgotten. The sound echoes up through the stone corridors with the acoustic properties of a tomb, which is fitting. The guard-robe is 3 flights down, past the chapel where morning prayers echo like coins dropped in an empty coffer, past the armory where the household guard polish their weapons with the devotion other men reserve for their wives, past the counting house where scribes in brown robes calculate the cost of empire with ink-stained fingers and permanently furrowed brows. Considering how many courtiers have found their way to actual tombs after a poorly timed jest or an insufficiently enthusiastic laugh at one of King Francis's hunting stories. But you've learned not to trust optimism. It's a luxury, like silk stockings or the belief that kings are chosen by God rather than by the sharpest sword and the deepest purse. Even in sleep, you are never not performing. The fabric, coarse wool dyed with whatever madder root, and weld the chateau's dyers could procure from Flanders, scratches against your ribs with each breath. It's a reminder, this discomfort. Comfort is for courtiers who matter, not for men whose value lies in their ability to mock those very courtiers without losing their heads in the process. The rushes beneath your straw mattress rustle like autumn leaves, though it's only May in this year of our Lord 1530, somewhere in the chateau's bowels, though calling them bowels seems unfair to actual bowels, which at least serve a useful purpose. The kitchen servants are already clattering about like armored saints in a morality play. You stretch, feeling the familiar pop of joints, and have spent too many nights on surfaces harder than royal hearts. The light filtering through your single window a luxury, that window suggesting you've managed to survive longer than most in your profession, carries the gray quality of dawn over water. Your bladder announces itself with the urgency of a papal bull. But first, the ritual of becoming. You cannot simply be a man relieving himself. You must be a jester relieving himself. The bells chime softly as you place the cap on your head, and immediately you feel the transformation. You make your way through corridors that smell of tallow candles, rushes that need changing. A servant girl passes, her wooden shoes clattering against the stone flags with a rhythm that sounds almost musical. The garb robe, when you finally reach it, is a testament to human ingenuity and aristocratic squeamishness. Built into the chateau's outer wall, it allows gravity and the lawyer's proximity to solve problems that philosophers have yet to address adequately. The wooden seat is worn smooth by countless noble posteriors, though this morning it is cold enough to make you gasp a sound that echoes in the small chamber like a prayer or a curse, depending on your theological perspective. Through the narrow window cut into the wall, you can see the chateau's gardens beginning to stir with activity. Gardeners move between the neat rows of herbs and vegetables with the methodical patience of men who understand that nature operates on its own schedule, regardless of royal demands. His Majesty requests your presence in the Great Hall for the morning meal. He announces, the words tumbled together in his haste to deliver them and escape. Long tables stretch across the stone floor, their surfaces covered with white linen that will be stained with wine and grease before the meal is half finished. Above, the hammer-beam ceiling soars into shadows where banners hang like sleeping bats, each one representing some victory that seemed important at the time. The kind of facial hair that requires daily attention from servants whose entire existence revolves around the care and feeding of royal whiskers. She carries herself with the rigid grace of someone who learned deportment before she learned to walk. Her spine straight as a cathedral column, her hands folded in her lap with the precise positioning of a manuscript illumination. Her gown is cloth of silver, complementing the king's gold, turning the royal couple into a matched set of precious metals given human form. It's a style that speaks of leisure, of time spent on appearance rather than survival, of a life where the primary concern is not whether you eat, but whether you eat well. Come, tell us something amusing to sweeten our breakfast. Trenchers of bread serve as plates, their crusts thick enough to support the weight of meats and gravies that will soak into them throughout the meal. Pork as well, from pigs that lived lives of relative luxury before being transformed into breakfast, their flesh now glistening with the kind of fat that makes vegetarians of philosophers and carnivores of saints. The bread is good bread, white bread, made from flour that has been sifted multiple times to remove anything resembling nutrition or character. Only the wealthy eat bread this white. The poor make do with darker loaves that actually provide sustenance, another of those curious inversions that make court life feel like living inside a joke that God is telling at humanity as expense. Here sit the most powerful people in France, perhaps in Europe, dressed as king and queen of heaven, while their subjects work fields that may or may not yield enough grain to survive the winter. It's the kind of irony that makes for excellent jokes, provided you can find a way to make the joke without making yourself the punchline in a very permanent way. But now serves mainly as decoration, and a reminder that glory is temporary, but the laundry bills are eternal. The bells on your cap provide a musical accompaniment, their silver voices announcing your presence as effectively as a herald's trumpet, but with considerably more charm and significantly less chance of being mistaken for a declaration of war. Pages learn quickly that bearing messages makes you a temporary target for whatever emotions the message might inspire, and messenger boys who survive their first year develop the ability to vanish like morning mist. Parsley and sage, rosemary and thyme, the familiar quartet that makes even the toughest meat palatable. But also more exotic additions: cinnamon from Ceylon, pepper from the Indies, sugar from the New World that Columbus stumbled upon while looking for a shorter route to spices that cost more than most men earn in a lifetime. He's a large man, our king, with the kind of physical confidence that comes from never having had to wonder where your next meal is coming from. His doublet is cloth of actual gold thread woven into silk, a garment that costs more than most villages see in a year. The effect is magnificent, like being addressed by a sunset made human, but you've learned that magnificent and good are two different words for excellent reasons. The global economy of flavor reaches even here to this stone pile beside the Loire, connecting your morning meal to merchants in Venice, sailors in Lisbon, and slaves in islands whose names you've never learned to pronounce. They're planting according to the lunar calendar, following traditions older than Christianity, older than Rome, older than the idea that one man can own another's laughter. Kitchen servants carry ewers of water, their contents sloshing gently as they navigate the stone steps worn smooth by centuries of feet. Stable boys dart past with the quick energy of youth, their clothes carrying the honest smells of hay and horses, clean scents compared to the perfumed corruption that will fill the great hall once the courtiers begin their day in earnest. The herbs they tend will end up in the chateau's kitchens, where cooks perform daily miracles of transformation. Finishing your business, you make your way back through corridors now beginning to fill with the chateau's daily population. A page stops you with the breathless urgency that marks all court communications, as if every message were a matter of war and peace. The great hall, when you enter it, is already alive with the peculiar theater of court dining. King Francis sits at the high table on the dais, his presence commanding the room's attention, even in casual conversation. The king's beard is fashioned in the style he's made popular throughout France, and beyond carefully trimmed pointed. Beside him sits Queen Eleanor, sister to the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, a marriage alliance that was supposed to solve more problems than it has. The irony of their positioning is not lost on you. You approach the high table with the peculiar gait of your profession, part dance, part stumble, designed to suggest that you might fall at any moment, but somehow never quite do. "Ah, our morning entertainment arrives," King Francis announces, his voice carrying across the great hall with the resonance of a man accustomed to being heard. The royal breakfast spreads before you like a demonstration of excess is necessity. There's beef, of course, great joints of it roasted over fires that consumed entire trees. The meat seasoned with herbs that traveled farther to reach this table than most people travel in their entire lives. Game birds nest among the other dishes like refugees from paradise peacocks and swans, prepared and arranged to look as if they might at any moment leap from their serving platters and resume their lives as living creatures. It's culinary theater, this breakfast, performance art disguised as nutrition, and sweet, prepared with sauces that cost more to make than most people earn in a month. The medieval tradition of fasting has evolved into the Renaissance art of eating with such style that the sin becomes its own absolution. You continue, timing your words to the rhythm of chewing and swallowing, the musical accompaniment of silver on pewter. The birds have been roasted, then their feathers replaced, their beaks gilded, their necks positioned in attitudes of aristocratic disdain that mirror their consumers with uncomfortable accuracy. Queen Eleanor's mouth curves in what might be a smile, though with royal expressions. You can never be entirely certain whether you're seeing amusement or the prelude to execution. Though I wonder if they considered that the most persistent admirers might be willing to risk a few scratches for the privilege of their company. But the roses pointed out that persistence and wisdom are often strangers to each other, and that the most ardent suitors frequently mistake possession for appreciation. You then navigated the treacherous waters successfully made your point about the nature of power and desire without directly criticizing anyone. Present allowed the audience to draw their own conclusions about who might be roses and who might be would-be pluckers. Fish, too, despite this being neither Friday nor Lent carp from the chateau's ponds, their flesh delicate. Not long ago, he was fighting against France in service to the Holy Roman Emperor, his betrayal making him one of the most hated men in the kingdom. You watched the Duke eat, and remember the broadsheets that circulated during his exile, calling him traitor and worse. Woodcut illustrations showing him hanged in effigy, while crowds of righteous citizens celebrated his disgrace. Now those same citizens would doff their caps if they saw him on the street, because power creates its own moral gravity, bending principles around its presence, like light around a star. The cartographers who create them work with instruments of brass and steel, calculating distances and angles with mathematical precision. But their maps still show vast areas marked simply as terra, incognita unknown land, where the imagination fills in details that experience has yet to provide. Dragons and sea monsters populate these empty spaces, not because anyone truly believes in such creatures, but because the alternative admitting that the world contains vastness beyond human comprehension is somehow more terrifying than any mythological beast. Now he's back, pardoned and restored, because kings need capable generals more than they need consistent principles. Plans for new fortifications along the Italian border, where French and imperial forces continue, their elaborate dance of advance and retreat that has characterized European politics since before you were born. The cost of these campaigns exceeds the annual income of entire provinces, but they continue because stopping would suggest weakness, and weakness is the one luxury no king can afford. His rehabilitation required careful management, months of public penance, and private negotiation. But here he sits, cutting his meat with the same hands that once signed treaties against his homeland. Ships arrive in Seville, carrying treasures that make Midas look like a pauper, while French merchants complain that they're being excluded from markets they consider rightfully theirs. The world is growing larger and smaller simultaneously, expanded by exploration and contracted by the speed at which news and gold travel. You settle into your role as easily as slipping into a familiar coat. Your Majesty, you begin, your voice pitched to carry just far enough. I was walking through the gardens this morning and observed the most curious thing. Servants move between the tables, like dancers in an elaborate ballet, carrying ewers of wine and platters of delicacies. Their movements choreographed by years of practice and the knowledge that mistakes in the great hall echo through the chateau as gossip network with the persistence of church bells. The roses were complaining about their thorns, claiming they prevented proper courtship. The way certain courtiers lean toward each other during conversation, suggesting alliances or conspiracies, or simply the human need for connection in a place where genuine friendship is a luxury few can afford. The manner in which servants' eyes track the movement of valuable objects, not from avarice, but from the professional need to know where everything is at all times. A ripple of laughter moves through the hall, courtiers recognizing the setup for what promises to be either entertainment or disaster, depending on where the joke leads. When I asked them why they didn't simply shed their thorns, they replied that without protection, every passing fool would pluck them for his own pleasure, leaving nothing but bare stems for those who truly appreciated their beauty. The laughter is more genuine now, people beginning to understand that the joke contains layers, that roses and thorns might represent more than horticultural concerns. Wise roses. King Francis observes, spearing a piece of beef with his knife and examining it as if it contained diplomatic secrets. Indeed, Your Majesty. This draws a laugh from several of the women at court, including Queen Eleanor, whose silver gown catches the morning light streaming through the great hall's windows like captured moonbeams. The meal continues around you, a symphony of consumption that would impress the Romans at their most decadent. You notice things that others miss, details that come from spending your life in the margins of power. The Duke of Bourbon sits at the king's right hand, his presence a testament to the complex mathematics of forgiveness and political necessity. Politics makes philosophers of jesters and cynics of saints. The conversation at the high table turns to the ongoing projects that consume royal attention and treasury funds with equal appetite. There's talk, too, of the New World, where Spanish conquistadors are discovering gold and silver in quantities that threaten to upset the delicate balance of European economics. You find yourself thinking about maps, those beautiful, impossible documents that attempt to reduce the world's complexity to lines on parchment. The king mentions his ongoing correspondence with various Italian city-states, each letter a miniature masterpiece of diplomatic language, saying everything and nothing with equal precision. Italian politics make French court intrigue look like children's games. Every alliance provisional, every friendship conditional, every treaty subject to revision whenever circumstances change. The Renaissance has produced remarkable art and architecture, but it has also perfected the science of betrayal, turning treachery into an art form as refined as sculpture or painting. A page brings news from Paris, where the Sorbonne continues its theological debates with the passion of people convinced that the fate of souls depends on the precise interpretation of Latin texts written by men who died centuries ago. The light catches the metallic threads in courtiers' clothing, creating a shimmering effect that makes the entire assembly look like characters in an illuminated manuscript come to life. A story about two merchants arguing over the price of salvation, each convinced he's offering God a better deal than his competitor. An observation about how court fashions change with the seasons, suggesting that consistency is a virtue only for people who can't afford variety. A gentle mockery of astrologers who claim to predict the future while remaining consistently surprised by the present. It's beautiful, this gathering of wealth and power and carefully cultivated taste, too safe, and you become wallpaper, ignored, and eventually forgotten. The collection here rivals those of monasteries and universities, volumes gathered from across Europe and beyond, their leather bindings worn smooth by countless hands seeking wisdom, or at least distraction from the complexities of existence. Too dangerous, and you become a cautionary tale, remembered only as an example of what happens when jesters forget their place. Outside, the Loire continues its eternal journey toward the sea, carrying with it the reflections of clouds and the detritus of human civilization in equal measure. There will be more performances required before the day ends, more jokes to navigate between safety and significance, more observations to make about the curious theater of court life. But for now, in this moment, you can simply exist as yourself rather than as the character you play for royal amusement. Ships pass occasionally, their sails full of wind and promise, carrying goods and passengers toward destinations that exist more in hope than in certainty. Arabic scholars explain mathematics and astronomy with clarity that makes European learning look provincial by comparison. The ancient Romans offer advice on governance and warfare that remains relevant despite the centuries separating their world from yours. Books represent humanity's attempt to defeat time through the preservation of thought, though whether this represents wisdom or hubris remains an open question. The art lies in finding the narrow space between these extremes, speaking truths that people need to hear but wouldn't tolerate from anyone else. But beauty and goodness remain as separate as oil and water, no matter how vigorously you shake the container. Servants begin the careful process of clearing tables, their movements economical and practiced, nothing wasted in a world where waste is both sin and stupidity. A Protestant Reformation spreads across Northern Europe like fire through dry timber, while Catholic authorities respond with the kind of intellectual flexibility typically associated with stone walls. These walls will outlast everyone who walks between them today, will witness the rise and fall of dynasties yet unborn, will shelter conversations and conspiracies that haven't yet been imagined. Stone remembers everything and forgives nothing, which makes it the perfect medium for housing human ambition. The bells on your cap chime their farewell song, a musical period at the end of your morning's entertainment. As you withdraw from the great hall, you can hear conversation resuming behind you, the normal rhythm of court life asserting itself like a river returning to its banks after flood. The stakes of these debates are measured in burned heretics and ruined lives, but from the distance of the Loire Valley, they seem almost abstract, philosophical exercises for people with more education than wisdom. You catch fragments of conversation from the lower tables, courtiers discussing their own concerns in voices that carry just far enough to suggest importance without risking overheard indiscretions. Marriage negotiations that will connect noble families across vast distances, creating networks of obligation and opportunity that stretch from the English Channel to the Mediterranean. Property disputes that have consumed generations of lawyers and threaten to outlive the original disputants. Fashion trends imported from Italy and modified to suit French sensibilities, because even clothing becomes a form of political statement when worn by people who matter. The morning light shifts as the sun climbs higher, streaming through the great hall's windows in golden shafts that illuminate dust motes dancing like tiny spirits. You perform throughout the meal, offering observations and anecdotes that walk the tightrope between entertainment and commentary. Each joke is a small gamble, a calculated risk that depends on reading the mood of your audience with the precision of a physician taking a pulse. The meal gradually winds toward its conclusion, platters emptied and wine cups drained, conversation shifting from the animated discussions of early morning to the more languid exchanges of people whose immediate needs have been satisfied. You excuse yourself with the elaborate courtesy required by protocol, owing to the king and queen with flourishes that are part respect and part performance art. The corridors seem quieter after the great hall's bustle, your footsteps echoing off stone walls with a hollow sound that emphasizes the chateau's massive solidity. You make your way toward the chateau's library, a room that serves as sanctuary for both books and people who find solace in their company. Greek philosophers debate ethics with Christian theologians, their arguments preserved in manuscript form like insects trapped in amber. You settle into a chair near one of the library's windows, the leather creaking with a sound like old bones. The afternoon stretches ahead like an unwritten page, full of possibility and potential disappointment in equal measure. The sun moves across the sky with astronomical precision, marking time in a world where time has become both more precious and more arbitrary than ever before. Mechanical clocks divide days into hours with mathematical accuracy, while human experience continues to flow according to its own rhythms, unmeasured and unmeasurable. The tension between these two ways of understanding duration creates a perpetual sense of displacement, as if you're living slightly out of phase with the world around you. Evening will bring new challenges and opportunities, fresh chances to balance truth and entertainment, wisdom and survival. The great hall will fill again with courtiers seeking distraction from their own mortality, their laughter masking fears that no amount of wealth or power can entirely dispel. You'll take your place among them, neither entirely of their world nor completely separate from it, a professional outsider whose existence depends on understanding exactly how far outside you can venture without losing your way back. But that is still hours away. For now, there is only this quiet moment, this temporary peace between performances, this brief respite from the exhausting business of being professionally amusing. The library holds you in its silence, like a prayer holds a penitent, offering the kind of solace that can only be found in the company of thoughts more permanent than your own. The Loire flows past the window, carrying its burden of water and time toward an ocean that has witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the birth and death of gods, the endless cycle of human hope and disappointment that defines existence in this strange, beautiful, terrible world. You are part of that flow, a temporary arrangement of flesh and consciousness that has learned to speak truth through jest, to find wisdom in folly, to survive by making others laugh at things that should probably make them cry. Tomorrow will bring new audiences, new jokes, new risks to navigate between survival and significance. But tonight, when the chateau settles into the silence that precedes sleep, you'll lie in your narrow bed, listening to stone walls, whisper secrets to shadows grateful for another day, successfully completed in the precarious profession of speaking truth to power while pretending it as all just entertainment. The bells on your cap rest silent on the table beside you, their silver voices waiting for the next performance, the next opportunity to chime accompaniment to carefully calculated irreverence. They understand their role in this elaborate theater, just as you understand yours. Together, you make music from the tension between what can be said and what must be said, finding harmony in the narrow space between silence and sedition. And in that space and that delicate balance between safety and significance, you continue to exist day after day, performance after performance. Joke after carefully constructed joke, a professional fool in a world that takes itself far too seriously for its own good. The irony is not lost on you, that wisdom and folly have become indistinguishable, that truth and jest share the same precarious throne. That survival depends on making people laugh at the very things that should inspire them to weep or rage or change. But then again, irony has always been the jester's greatest tool and heaviest burden, the lens through which the world reveals its essential absurdity and the weight that threatens to crush those who see too clearly. You carry both with equal skill, because in the end, that's what it means to be a jester in Renaissance France. To see everything, to understand the cost of seeing, and to transform that understanding into laughter that echoes through stone halls long after the jokes themselves are forgotten.